The Odyssey feels like the film Nolan has been working toward his entire career. A story about a man with a fractured mind clawing his way back home after calamity doesn't just echo the outline of his past films, it feels like the culmination of them. The obsession of Memento, the guilt of Inception, the cosmic isolation of Interstellar, all of it converges here, in a tale older than recorded history. But the connection runs deeper. For years now, Nolan has been circling one question: what happens to humanity after catastrophe? You see it in Oppenheimer, where a man becomes the architect of a new era of fear. You see it in Tenet, where time itself becomes a weapon fracturing the world into global annihilation. And now in the Odyssey, Nolan pushes that question into myth, using Odysseus as a vessel to explore the psychological wreckage left behind when a man does whatever it takes to win. A director known for his grounded, almost clinical realism suddenly steps into fantasy and horror, not as spectacle but as psychological terrain. Many wondered how Nolan would translate gods, monsters, and mythic trials into his filmmaking language. The answer is surprisingly subtle. He doesn't chase the fantastical, he humanizes it. He treats the Odyssey not as myth, but as trauma, a journey where every victory scars the hero. Is it Nolan's best film? Not to me, but I do think the Odyssey might be the most defining moment of his career. After this, Nolan's filmography exists in a post-Odyssey landscape, and the rest of the film industry will have to adjust to whatever he does next, because this film isn't just a technical achievement or an artistic flex, it's a statement. A declaration of what stories and messages he wants to give the large audience he has amassed across the decades. But what exactly makes this film important outside of artistry and spectacle? What is Nolan telling the audience through Odysseus' journey? And what's the cost of defying the gods? Part 1. The journey, the man, the world. The challenge of adapting the Odyssey almost certainly played a role in why Nolan chose it as his next film. After making a biopic about the man who created the atom bomb and watching that film cross $1 billion, he probably felt like he could do anything. But even at the height of his notoriety, Nolan's approach to filmmaking remains calculated. He doesn't leap blindly into genres, he interrogates them. And when he steps into the fantasy epic space, he does it with the same precision he brings to grounded realism. The journey itself sits at the center of the film, sandwiched between Odysseus' departure from and return to Ithaca. Across this middle stretch, Odysseus and his fleet encounter everything you expect from Homer's tale: a cyclops, giants, witches, sirens, the dead, hell, and the gods, or at least the psychological impacts of them. Nolan frames these trials through Odysseus' own narration, recounting his experiences to Calypso, which gives the entire journey a haunted, retrospective quality, which is similar to many of Nolan's films. The repetitive nature of the crew's misfortunes could feel exhausting, but that's the point. The Odyssey is a story built on reoccurrence, mistakes repeated, lessons half learned, victories that cost more than they give, and that repetition reveals Odysseus' central struggle, the tension between hubris and intelligence. The internal conflict inside Odysseus is where Nolan makes the character more or less than a mythic hero. He becomes a man. A fractured, brilliant, self-destructive man, punishing himself for the same very qualities that define him. To me, no performance or character in the film comes close to Odysseus. He's the clear standout, not just because of Matt Damon's performance, but because the script understands him as a man who is painfully aware of his own legend. Odysseus carries his reputation like armor. He revels in the praise he receives from his people and fellow Greek warriors, even if he wears that pride quietly. And yet he knows that his myth can be used to persuade, to coerce, to manipulate when necessary. Odysseus' struggle is the tension between seeing the big picture and believing he has the power to change it. He understands the truth behind the war for Helen of Troy, that it's a smokescreen by Agamemnon to shift the balance of power. He tells Penelope this, and when she urges him to run away with her, he folds under the rule of men, despite living differently than the rulers he'd follow into battle. And that loyalty becomes the crack in his spear. The very system he upholds is what pushes him toward defying Zeus's law. Treat one as you wish to be treated. In Nolan's telling, Odysseus' moral fracture doesn't just doom his men, it reshapes the world. Principles become tactics, honor becomes strategy, mercy becomes leverage. The Trojan horse is the perfect symbol of this duality, the brilliance of Odysseus the myth, and the flaw of Odysseus the man. Winning the war at any cost becomes the first victory that destroys him. From that moment on, the man is lost, and the men who follow him fall believing in his wisdom. The world of the Odyssey is permanently reshaped by the Trojan War. Political power fractures, alliances rot, and the moral values of men erode under the weight of victory. History sings the song of the victors, but never what the victors lose by winning. While Greece celebrates its triumph, the people of Ithaca and Sparta whisper about the sea people, men who roam the waters, defying the laws of the gods, leaving chaos and ruin in their wake. Nolan uses this backdrop to show how societies speak of peace in public and hunger for power in private. Every character in this story either yearns for power, flees from it, or mourns what it turned them into. Corruption isn't isolated, it's universal. The encounters with the Cyclops and Circe become mirrors of this truth, two sides holding different types of power, neither interested in peace or understanding. Their interactions collapse immediately into contests of leverage, wit, and dominance. Circe's sequence poses the film's most unsettling question. Are we born monstrous, or does evil accumulate through action? Were the Trojans always the pigs who pillaged the city of Troy? Was Odysseus always the man who would break the gods' faith in humanity? Or was he simply a strategist whose morals cracked under circumstance? In Nolan's world, the answer isn't simple, and that ambiguity is the point. The war didn't just change nations, it changed the moral fabric of the world itself, and Odysseus, knowingly or not, becomes both a product of that world and one of the architects of its decline. Part 2. Trojan Horse. Nolan's last film tried to humanize the man who created the atom bomb. In the Odyssey, he goes in the opposite direction, not only kicking the pedestal out from the Greek heroes for most of the film, but also reinterpreting the symbol of the Trojan horse. Culturally, the horse represents strategy over brute force, human ingenuity triumphing in warfare. But in this film, it becomes something darker, a symbol of duality. Not just the duality of mankind, but the duality inside Odysseus. The horse was perceived as a peace offering, a gesture of surrender, when in reality it was the instrument of annihilation. Without Odysseus' plan, the war drags on and more men die. But in betraying Zeus's law, Odysseus doesn't just doom the Trojans, he dooms his own people. Men like Synod die because of his lies, never being privy to the truth of his strategy. Others are drowned in their own waste in the horse sculpture, before the plan can even be executed. And when the Trojan horse succeeds, the world is reshaped by the psychological manipulation and tactical deception rather than principles or honor. Odysseus never wanted to fight this war, but he does because he's loyal to the rule of man, a rule that not only corrupts his morality and turns him into a monster in his own eyes, but threatens the life he built in Ithaca. Yet his praises are sung. His legend grows, and the question lingers. Without the Trojan horse and the journey that followed, would Odysseus ever break from his loyalty to men, even though knowing the destruction they bring? It's the film's central question. Are we born this way, or do our circumstances shape the monsters we become? The Circe scene makes this explicit. When Odysseus begs her to turn his men back from pigs into humans, she tells him she didn't transform them, she revealed them. As she restores their bodies, she repeats, "Put back on your disguises." Odysseus believes he's different than his men because he recognizes the brutality in their actions, but he justifies his own brutality through politics and laws that bend depending on who's in power. Throughout the film, he refuses to honor the dead in the traditional way, insisting that keeping the living alive matters more, but his logic is short-sighted. He can't see that death isn't always the worst outcome, not when the alternative is moral decay. And the film keeps pairing that blindness with moments of symbolic irony. At the same time, Odysseus plucks his bow, alert animals that a hunter is near. He once chose to invade a city using a symbol of peace. The same man who announces violence honestly in the wild is the man who smuggled destruction into Troy under the guise of mercy. That contradiction is the heart of his duality. The tension between the brutality he condemns and the brutality he commits. When asked why he fights for his men, his answer exposes a selfish desperation intertwined with his selflessness. The innocent blood on his hands after the Trojan horse is unthinkable. He knows all his men will die on the journey home. He fights the gods to keep them alive, but the truth is that the men he knew, the men he loved, died inside the horse. They didn't lose their humanity. They lost perspective. They were entombed in darkness with one goal: win at any cost. Odysseus' mistake was believing that sacrificing customs, principles, and moral clarity was worth a victory in a war that faded almost instantly. His intellect and hubris convinced him he could restore the men who abandoned their morals for a strategy. But the deception of the Trojan horse wasn't just inflicted on the Trojans, it was inflicted on the Greeks and on Odysseus himself. Part 3. Defy the Gods. The gods are rarely present in this film. Other than a brief descent into hell, the characters never interact with divine beings directly. Yet their presence is felt everywhere, in the crashing waves, the sudden claps of thunder, the violent shifts in weather, and in the moral atmosphere of the story itself. Where Nolan chooses to begin the narrative implies one of two things. Either the gods have withdrawn from the world, or the ego of men has grown so large after the victory at Troy that humanity no longer feels the need for divine order. That arrogance directly opposes Zeus's law, yet it's celebrated across Ithaca. The absence of gods as characters doesn't diminish the mysticism of the world. It heightens the film's focus on humanity, morality, and the consequences of human choice. Take the Cyclops sequence. After the Greeks escape, they're immediately met with towering waves and violent rainfall. Odysseus' crew believes they're cursed by Poseidon for blinding his son, but the film leaves room for another possibility. The curse began the moment Troy fell. Whether that's divine punishment, karmic justice, or human de-evolution is for the audience to interpret. The cutting of Athena's head, a recurring image throughout the film, reinforces that ambiguity. We see it again and again without context, until Athena finally appears to Odysseus, asking why he insists on carrying all the blame. If he misled his men, who misled him? Only later in his confession to Penelope do we learn the truth. The woman Odysseus sees as Athena is an innocent Trojan, decapitated at the same moment the statue was defaced. His visions aren't divine intervention, they're manifestations of guilt, trauma, and the moral debt he refuses to acknowledge. Defying the gods means many things in this story, but for Odysseus, it's tied to two impulses: his desire to protect his family and his desperate need to keep his men alive. For his family, he becomes a myth, a legend whose choices reshape the world. For his men, he fights against the current of Poseidon, convinced he can outthink fate through sheer resilience. As before, this is rooted in compassion, but also in ego. Odysseus believes he can change the inevitable. He believes his mind, the same mind that ended a 10-year war, can solve any problem, even death. Trying to save men he knows are doomed is futile, yet he persists because he cannot accept a world where his intellect has limits. The truth he resists isn't simply that the gods may have cursed him. The truth is that Odysseus has far less control than he wants to admit. That lack of control terrifies him, and when he finally approaches the realization that his men's deaths aren't entirely his fault, he runs from it. He chooses bliss over reality, but even in bliss, the internal conflict remains. He keeps trying to build a raft on Calypso's island, the place he spent 7 years, the place where she claims they were happy, but deep down he knows his home still exists, somewhere beyond the horizon. He knows he cannot stay in a world built on denial. It's only when he relinquishes control that he finds his way back to himself. The man who defied the gods, who inspired others to believe victory justified any means, becomes free only when he accepts how small he truly is in the equation of life. Despite his kingdom, his experience, the deaths he caused and tried to prevent, the answers he sought were never found in legend or in rivalry with the divine. His answer was to let go, to accept penance, to accept his limits, and to accept the truth he spent the entire journey running from. Part 4. Post-Odyssey. If the film's answer to these questions is essentially, it could be this or that, if humanity's nature is ambiguous, if our capacity for cruelty or compassion shifts with circumstance, if the final statement of the film is that we will repeat our mistakes in the name of victory, then what the hell are we supposed to do with that message? That lingering feeling is, to me, the most powerful and accurate part of Nolan's adaptation of Homer's tale. We as humans are simple. We see something cool or familiar and assume it's good. We see something strange or uncomfortable and assume it's bad. Matt Damon's casting as Odysseus works because he's familiar, trusted, and mythic in the eyes of the audience, just as Odysseus is trusted by his men. Whether he loses your trust or earns it is up to you, just as the men who died didn't all hate him. Some even screamed his name when they were separated in the Great Storm. The Odyssey is about self-reflection, but also about what you choose to do after you reflect. Do you run from the answers you find? Do you bury your head in the sand and hope the next wave washes the burden away? We shouldn't ask what we would do in Odysseus' shoes before he left for Troy. We should ask what we would do after. If the question is whether humans are rotten at the core, or whether war and calamity make us forget the humanity of others, then the real question becomes, can we still change despite either of those realities? Nolan is the defining director of his era, and this film feels like the end of the third distinct phase of his career. With the audience he's gained over the years, he chose, in his last two films, to ask a blunt, uncomfortable question. Are we good? And people praised him for asking it. But did we answer it? Or have we been like Odysseus on Calypso's island, waiting for the next moment of comfort or entertainment, even though deep down we know something is wrong? Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. I'll be back again. Peace.